Senator, I'm going to brag on you so that you don't have to do it. It's easier and more polite if somebody does it for you. This is a big development in the Army Futures Command, and you deserve a lot of credit for that. I know you're proud of it. For folks that don't know, tell them what that is.
Well, the Army announced last week that Austin, Texas, is the site of the new Army's Future Command, which is a three-star command that is charged with modernizing the Army and with streamlining the adoption of new weapons and new technology. And this is going to result in about 500 jobs in the Austin area immediately. And it is the command charged with laying out the modernization and future of the Army. And it's a big, big deal. They had a competitive process all across the country for where to base this command. And ultimately, Austin prevailed, and I leaned in vigorously in support of Austin, and was very glad that the Army agreed.
You know, it's interesting when things like that happen. You know, here we are in the shadows of NASA. You don't realize at that time how big a deal that's going to be, but literally for generations, that makes a difference for generations.
Yeah. Well, and I tell you, it was a coordinated push. So the governor's office played an important part in it. The University of Texas played an important part in making the case. And so I personally spent time with both Army Secretary Mark Esper and Army Undersecretary Ryan McCarthy, who were leading up this process. And the case I was making is, I said, they were looking at a bunch of cities all over the country at the end, and the one Texas city was Austin. And I said, you know what, none of these other places can match what Austin has in terms of, number one, young talent coming out of UT every year, scientists, engineers, mathematicians. Number two, the tech community. The tech community in and around Austin is growing and booming, and that's a tremendous resource for the Army Futures Command. And then number three, a commitment to the military. There is simply no state in the Union that loves the military, that values the military, that supports the military the way Texas does. And so the case I made was that Austin was, for what they were looking for, the perfect combination. The University of Texas leaned in and provided them with space, so they're going to co-locate the command as part of the physical space of the University of Texas system. And I think it's going to prove a really significant thing for the future of the Army, but also for the future of Texas.
Senator Ted Cruz is our guest. Some leading Democrats and major leaders in the Democrat Party are calling for the abolition of ICE, which I never believed would happen. Your response to that?
Well, Michael, you're right. I mean, we really have entered a crazy time. You know, all of this started about a month ago, and it started about a month ago when this socialist fringe candidate in New York won a Democratic primary and defeated a longtime incumbent Democratic congressman, astonished the Democratic Party nationally. And she had run on a campaign explicitly. It was a radical campaign, but part of it was abolishing ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, which is the agency that is charged with enforcing our immigration laws, with keeping us safe, with fighting drug cartels and criminals. And since that primary win, we've been seeing Democrats all over the country just falling all over themselves to gallop to the left and call for abolishing ICE. And then just this week, both houses of Congress voted on a resolution supporting ICE, supporting the men and women of law enforcement who risk their lives, who apprehend vicious drug dealers and cartels and gang members and keep us safe. I was a co-sponsor of that resolution. I spoke emphatically in favor of it. I voted in favor of it. You know, Democrats used to pretend that they support enforcing immigration laws. Now they're supporting abolishing the agency charged with enforcing immigration laws. That's really... It is not good for our country to have one of our two major parties getting so extreme and so radical that it's out of touch with the American people.
Senator Brett Kavanaugh, the nominee to replace Justice Kennedy, has sort of been bumped off the front pages. Is that good or bad news for his nomination?
I think it's good news. I think Brett Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed as the next Supreme Court justice. And I think this may well prove one of the most consequential things that has happened in the entire Trump presidency. I've known Brett for 20 years. I sat down with him this week in my office, and I will say he is by any measure one of the most accomplished, one of the most respected federal judges in the country. He spent over a decade on the D.C. Circuit, which is the federal court of appeals covering D.C. It's often referred to as the second highest court in the land. And he has a very strong record, a number of issues that are critically important, including separation of powers, including reining in the overbroad power of federal agencies, including the Second Amendment, including religious liberty. And so I'm encouraged that he's got over 300 published opinions. And the Democrats are captive to their far left. So their response is simply screaming rage and opposition. But they haven't found any grounds on which to oppose it. That being said, I think more than half the Senate Democrats have already said they're a no without listening to a word he said, without knowing anything about him. In fact, it became so ridiculous, one of the left-wing groups put out their opposition, blasting him as anti-woman, that apparently he hates women. But they prepared the press release, and they had Judge XXX, because they were prepared to just drop in whoever's name was nominated, is anti-women and hates women. Well, they sent out the press release, and somebody forgot to cut and paste and take out the XXX and add the name Kavanaugh. So they just sent out a press release, Judge XXX is terrible and hates women. And it really shows the game that's going on. It wouldn't have mattered who Trump nominated. The hard would have opposed them because they want radical leftists. And any radical leftist who isn't a judicial activist is unacceptable for them. That may be their view, but that's not the American people. And I'm confident that by the first Monday in October, which is the start of the Supreme Court's next term, that Judge Kavanaugh will be confirmed as Justice Kavanaugh.